Hey guys, I'm Phil. That's Sam.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel.
We are Bars and Barbells, and we're checking out food in America compared to the UK. Why is it so different? This is on the heels of we did McDonald's, the US versus the UK differences, and this kind of popped up as a recommendation to check out. So interested to see what the food dynamics and a little more intricate perspective look like between the UK and America. We're not from America, so this will be informative on both fronts. We grew up in Canada.
Yep.
Obviously, Canada's very similar to the US, but those differences are coming to light a little bit more so right now in the world. Yeah, I mean, there are some differences, I think, even in Canada between the US and the food dynamics. So,
Well, even in the McDonald's one, right, there was things you and I had never heard of from
Right.
the US one. So
yeah, I think that Europe is. So Canada is more similar to the US than it is similar to Europe in terms of ingredients and stuff used. But I know there's ingredients used in the US that isn't used in Canadian.
yeah, I feel
food,
like there's
so-
the US, Europe, and then Canada's like in the middle,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
leaning towards the US.
Yeah, but we've both grown up in fitness, nutrition as a part of our career. So we are always interested in this kind of content because it gives us a perspective into the worldview on food, which is super important, right? What you eat, that's like 80% of how healthy you're going to be. Of course, exercise matters, but it's what you put into your body to fuel yourself that really, really makes a big difference.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm very interested to see in the differences here outside of just like the McDonald's or the fast food perspective.
Let's check it out.
Did you know that if you were to buy certain food ingredients at a grocery store in the United Kingdom, in Europe, and in America, same brand, same type chip, a packaged good, you could buy the exact same brand of food and the ingredient labels will be completely different. I believe this is one of the main reasons why the United States is so sick. What I'm about to show you of what we allow into our products compared to what is happening in other parts of the world is shocking. And it's kind of shameful for the government regulation or lack thereof that goes into this and the foods you're about to see of what is making us so sick in America, leading the way in chronic disease. So this is one of the things that really opened my eyes to how food companies, especially in America, are just exploiting us. I've spent years investigating this and the difference between European and American food and the products and what I found that I'm about to show you, it disgusted me.
Those
So back in
preservatives.
2012, I went to the London Olympics. I got the privilege to be
Cool.
a Olympic team doctor and support the athletes leading
Wow.
up to it for the wrestling team and
That would've been
weightlifting
fun.
team, and got to be at the Olympic house and see many of them win medals, and it's a fantastic experience. And Nurse Living Good, my wife, got to go with me, and we raised money for these athletes and helped support them. It's amazing how little support some of the athletes don't get. But while I was over there, I got to experience European food, and I noticed there was a big difference on some simple foods in a convenience store, in a grocery store, compared to the ones back in America.
Let's dive in.
So right now we're going to break down some of the pictures, comparing them from a before or after. Now, this resource I came across with Food Babe, who does a fantastic job of putting them side by side, but it's the exact same thing that I saw and confirmed when I was over there at the Olympics, looking at these companies like Kraft, Heinz, Kellogg's, Pepsi Company, Quaker. They sell safer, better products overseas while making inferior versions right here in America, feeding it to Americans. The evidence that you're about to see runs the gamut from fast food places to boxed cake mixes to cereals to candies, even oatmeal. You can't escape it. So this is what set me down this path of calling out big food industries, calling out big pharma industries, but leading you guys to make food simple. And I've never looked back of trying to figure out what's causing us to be so sick instead of waiting for people to get sick or exploiting sick people like big pharma and big food has done. Check these out. Here are 6 products that are completely different overseas than they are in America. Let's start with the big one, McDonald's French fries.
Funny that we've
They
done
make
McDonald's.
their iconic French fries in the UK with a few simple ingredients: potatoes, oil, dextrose, salt. But in the US, completely different label. They're made
Sam's
with natural
favorite
beef flavor.
flavor.
They're made with sodium. They're made with pyrophosphate. And they are fried in oil laced with anti-foaming agents. That's the main ingredient in silly putty.
Ugh.
But why is it ending up in our food? They've somehow figured out to cook their fries without all these extra ingredients overseas, but why not here? Begs the question. Second one to look at, Quaker Oats.
So I think that's one of the things that doesn't go answered, unfortunately, is the why, and I guess we're alluding to that. Why is it so different? I mean, we're getting into some of the differences, but why is it so different? Because you have American corporations that are, then moving overseas, but obviously the government limitations on what they're allowed to do with the food is so much different. And so they have to take a different approach, and they still make those products that people love and enjoy, but it's seemingly healthier. So you go back to the US, it's like, what's the need for including all these other ingredients if you're able to make it, just as well in a different fashion? And then you dive deeper into the conspiracy theories of, when you make people sick, then that makes a pharmaceutical industry a whole lot of money. And if you keep people sick on those pharmaceutical drugs, then they make more and more money. And a sick population means that they need to have a problem that needs to be resolved, right? And so you create the problem by keeping people sick, and then you offer the solution in terms of treatments that has a constant revenue stream. So I think the why, when you start to dive deeper into it, it opens a whole floodgate of reasons why you're like, wow, that would be really sinister.
Yeah, I think also part of it too is certain ingredients are used to create a more addictive response to some of the foods as well, right? Like the more, like you said,
valid.
obviously if you're making them more sick, but also you're making them more addictive, people are going to continue to eat them more frequently in larger quantities, right?
Comes back to revenue again.
Exactly. And maybe to some degree, maybe not the number one, but cutting costs in certain areas. Like if you're using crappier oils, that's going to be a lower cost. You're going to have higher margins, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, for sure that plays a role. But I think like we just saw, when you have like 10 ingredients versus 4, the costs of those ingredients that you're using are going to add up, right?
Yep.
So I think, like you're alluding to, the point about it being more addictive is a great one, because there's a real reason as to why are you doing it, right?
Yeah,
It's
100%.
a driver that the consumer behavior is that they come back and they keep purchasing, which is like a subscription model of everything today, right?
Yeah.
You've now got a consumer
You're-
as on a subscription model, is that they keep coming back every single month.
Yeah, like you're
which
driving up
guarantees
your
revenue.
driving up your client lifetime value, right? Way up, because
Yeah.
they're going to continue to rebuy.
All right, let's continue.
Begs the question. Second one to look at, Quaker Oats. These instant oat packets. Did you know Quaker Oats strawberries and cream has 0 strawberries? In the U.S., Quaker mimics
strawberry
the
flavoring.
look and the taste of real strawberries, and what they use is flavored and colored fruit pieces. They're comprised of dehydrated apples, and then they use artificial strawberry flavoring,
Right.
citric acid, and artificial dye, red number 40, which would cause concentration
good.
issues. It's total craziness. It's not even a strawberry. Meanwhile, in the UK, Quaker doesn't even attempt to sell that garbage. It doesn't make any products like that.
Fries, street
The closest
raspberries,
counterpart that they have is a product called Oats So Simple
strawberries.
that has real strawberries in it, and it's light years ahead of the popular US version that's made with all those toxic artificial dyes and artificial colorings. Number 3 is Mountain Dew. Now, none of these foods are healthy. I don't advise eating them, and some of you can just save the comment of like, well, I just shouldn't eat them anyway. But I'm just comparing, how are they approved overseas? And here we're allowed to put all this garbage in there. I mean, you pick up a bottle of Mountain Dew in the UK, and you'll find that it gets its bright yellow color simply from beta carotene. It's a natural color derived from carrots and other plants. Meanwhile, Pepsi, who makes Mountain Dew, sells a very different version of Mountain Dew in America. Here in the States, instead of using natural colors to give it that bright popping look, Mountain Dew is artificially colored with a petroleum-based dye
That's
called
insane.
Yellow Number 5. Major
Didn't know
problems
that.
with reproductive issues and allergens with that. Now, artificial dyes are common in America, but that doesn't make them okay to eat. They've been linked to several health issues, like I just explained, as well as they're known carcinogens, some of them.
Yep.
They're certainly not as safe as beta carotene, but Mountain Dew, that story gets worse. The US version of Mountain Dew also contains brominated vegetable oil, BVO. And that ingredient is banned in Europe.
What do you like?
Way back in 2014, Pepsi said, okay, we're going to do the right thing. We're going to remove BVO from all the American drinks following a real successful petition that was put on. But they still have not removed it from the Mountain Dew. Nearly, this many years later. They continue to sell the BVO-free version in other countries, and they allow us to stay sick and toxic. Number 4, Heinz.
That's crazy. I mean, I would be curious. Now I just want to actually go and try these different, take the Mountain Dew from the US and take the Mountain Dew from the UK and have a drink of each one to see what it tastes like.
Yeah.
I'll just be having a little bit, guys. Don't worry. I won't be going down the pathway of having too much here. But, just seeing the difference in the flavors, if there is a significant difference, because again, it brings you back to the why even bother with it, right? And then it leads us into the conversation we were having earlier. But, from the standpoint of the U.S. here and its citizens, it's got to be really, really frustrating. If you're watching this video and you don't know these things, obviously Sam and I are much more aware of what's been going on because we've worked in the industry for a while and we are pretty passionate about eating healthy. And, we stick to whole foods for the most part. And we've been doing that for a long time. And it's because we've been aware of what's been going on in the food industry. Yeah. But if you're not aware of this, that's, what we've dealt with so many times is so many people just don't know any of this stuff. And it's scary, right? Because you're trying to find, you got to work your job, take care of the kids and do all these other things in life. And on top of that, you got to eat, you got to, do the things you need to survive. But you would expect that your government and the sectors that are supposed to be regulating the food that you're eating are doing it for your benefit, right? And I think that's the thing that's most frustrating for me. But also I feel like if you're in an American citizen watching this, it's like, why are we doing this when we know that the long-term repercussions could be substantial?
Well, yeah. And I think a big problem is that, people are feeling overwhelmed because they feel like they can't eat anything, because they feel like they go to the grocery store and they're being told everything is unhealthy. But like the reality is that a large majority of the foods are unhealthy because of this exact reason, that the regulation has allowed it to get to a point where there's nasty ingredients and everything. So it's like people are like, I can't even eat oatmeal anymore. I can't even eat whatever. But it's like, when you look at it, it actually is not healthy because of the additives, not from the original food itself.
Yeah, I mean, and even that, right? Like, there's things on here, like you were saying, like Mountain Dew is not good for you because it's got a ton of sugar in it, and sugar can lead to a whole bunch of issues, insulin sensitivity and cancers and all that kind of stuff. So what were you going to say?
I was going to say, even that he didn't point out that in the Mountain Dew, in the US version, it was high fructose corn syrup, and in the UK, it was cane sugar, I believe. Like he didn't even touch on that, which is another comparison.
Yeah, and so I think, he's highlighting that, like you said, there's things here that you shouldn't probably have in general, but they make it so much worse by adding these foods. Like you're saying, is that you could probably, in years past have had it and it not been too much of an issue.
Or like in moderation, at least.
Yeah. And then I think the other big component of this is the trust factor. Like I was saying, is that, you just trust that it's not going to be as bad as what it is. You just think there's no way that they would allow this stuff to go into my food.
If it's
there's
that
no
bad.
Way, right? Yeah. And it's a big eye opener once you start to realize that the vested interests are not for you. It's for other people. And, like we talked about revenue, making money, business. That's, it's all about the bottom line. And you have to approach it that way with food. You have to understand that it's not in your best interest. They're not going to watch out for you. You got to watch out for yourself, right?
Other countries, and they allow us to stay sick and toxic. Number 4, Heinz Ketchup. The kind you're going to find in almost every restaurant in America.
Yep.
Heinz Ketchup is GMO-free in the United Kingdom, but full of genetically modified organisms and high fructose corn syrup in the United States, along with lab-produced natural flavorings, which not all of them are bad, but from a company like this, they're bad. And it helps create an addiction to the product.
There you go.
Think of that the next time you're dipping your fries and you can't stop eating that ketchup. Now, Heinz is attempting to make a simply Heinz version ketchup in the United States with natural flavorings and cleaner ingredients. Why don't they just make the same one that they use over in the UK as their regular ketchup? There's no need for all the heavy processing, but they want to get you more addicted to it, so you'll buy more of it. It's a problem. Number 5, Doritos. Now, both versions of Doritos are horrible, but the American Doritos are covered in artificial dyes. They're all made from petroleum, the red number 40, the blue number 1, the yellow number 5, super toxic. The dyes have been found to be contaminated with carcinogens, such as benzidine. Benzenes can create some really ugly blood cancers if overconsumed. In the UK, these dyes require a warning label that they may have adverse effects on the activity and attention in children, let alone other side effects. So no company wants to put that on their product because people won't buy it, so they just don't use the artificial dyes. Instead, they simply use things like paprika extract and annatto in order to get the flavoring. The Doritos in the UK are also non-genetically modified, while the American versions are made up of GMO corn contaminated with glyphosate, that herbicide, weed killer, and then laced with all these chemicals. Finally, number 6, Frosted Flakes. The jingle, the
Tony the Tiger.
The mighty, mighty tiger. I mean, I ate them as a kid. I get it. There's no nutritional value going on here. But at first glance, the Frosted Flakes in the United States and the UK, they look nearly identical. But there's one big difference. There's a preservative in the US version called BHT. Now, this is important because there's a lot of controversial research linking BHT to cancer. And it's believed to also be an endocrine disruptor, which means it's going to mess with your hormones, men and women. And it's not even permitted in cereals in Europe. So Kellogg's reformulated their cereals so that they can legally sell them overseas. And then following a petition to get the BHT out of it, Kellogg's removed it from several brands like Rice Krispies, but it still uses it several years later in the Frosted Flakes still, despite selling it BHT free in other parts of the world. It makes no sense. Why don't these companies just sell the same safer products everywhere? Well, I'll tell you why. Europe takes a precautionary principle approach towards food additives that are potentially risky. They ban or they add warning labels to these additives for their people. The US takes the opposite approach. It doesn't remove the additives from our food supply until they have been proven to be dangerous. And that can take years and a lot of red tape to get approved. So it literally means you're the lab rat. Americans are the lab rat. And the US government allows food companies to largely police itself, deciding which ingredients they're going to use, which chemicals they're going to use, which additives they're going to use, which ones are safe to add to their own products. That clearly isn't a wise approach, is it? Because if a company can get away with a cheaper ingredient, they're going to do it. Given a choice, they're always going to opt for the cheaper flavor enhancer, the cheaper color additive, the cheaper preservative, the cheaper genetically modified organism and ingredient. Even if these cheaper alternatives have negative health impacts, they're going to choose that route for the sake of profit over people. Truth is that no one's watching out for us. No one's going to take better care of you and your family's health than you. When they tell you that they know their processed foods are safe, they're telling you a lie. So I've dedicated a big part of my teachings and my life towards educating people on the deceptiveness of, one, big pharma and drugs and waiting to get sick and covering them up in side effects, and big food and all the garbage that ends up in our unreal food, and help them make food simple. So I put several chapters in my Amazon best-selling book, Make Food Simple, because it's a subject that there's a lot more that you need to know about, to watch out for, to learn how to read labels. The food industry doesn't care about your health. It's your responsibility to do it. Below I put a link that you can grab a free copy of this book. You just cover the shipping. I'll get it to you. However, it also took you to the grocery store to start teaching you how to understand these. I started in the produce area to find some real secret gems on how to shop better for your food, identify what's making you unhealthy, and start protecting yourself and your family. That video is right here. Enjoy.
And that was the differences of food in America versus the UK. So Sam, do you have some thoughts that you want to add?
I just think it's crazy that they get away with that. But obviously, like he said, right, the system is designed to be that way. And at the end of the day, people need to take responsibility for their own health.
Yeah, I think, the thing with America, it's, a free market, it's focused on capitalism, and it's, produced a lot of substantial benefits in terms of the US becoming the most wealthy country in the world. There's been downside to that, of course, but, it's the old adage, where would you, rather live than the USA? Because there's so many opportunities there, and the American dream, blah, 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 blah. And, I think the counter to that is there's not a lot of balance. And I think finding the balance between that free market and the regulatory process is very difficult in, certain different types of businesses. But I think it's really, really important when we come to agriculture and food and, the industrialization and engineering process. Those are areas where you need to have really good oversight and people in those positions doing their job really, really well. In other areas, it can become problematic and, really restrictive in terms of growth. Like in Canada, for example, it's like, building a house or, building houses or a condo development, building development can take 8 years. In other places, it takes 2 or 3. So the regulatory environment is really, really important in balancing that. And I think we see in the US here, it's just gone off the rails. And maybe, whether you like him or hate him, Robert Kennedy Jr. is somebody that's been really, really outspoken about the issues with food in American culture. So I'm hopeful that with him in there, and like I said, you can disagree with some of his other ideas, but in terms of food, he's made that a big priority, that he wants to clean up the agricultural movement and hopefully hold some of these companies accountable, because that's what it is, right? They have to be held accountable to what they're doing with these products because nobody else is going to do it, right? It's very hard for the average person, like I said, to do what he said, in taking it into your own hands. But there's so many questions and it's so confusing. And even on social media now, you hear it's not, fat is the problem. Fat isn't the problem. Sugar's not as bad as this. And that you should have, a Mediterranean diet or a paleo diet or a keto diet or, a low calorie diet or whatever, right? Or, intermittent fasting. There's so many things out there, I think, at this point that it gets confusing for people. So it's difficult. And that's an instance where it is beneficial to have people that are professionals in higher up positions making good, important decisions for the rest of society in a positive light. But unfortunately, within that also comes that people have a lot of power and they'll abuse it. And I think that's what's happened with a lot of these food and drug companies.
Yeah, and I mean, in my personal perspective, and maybe I just don't know enough about it yet and need to do more research, but I don't think it's even the regulation process that's the problem. I think it's the approach to the regulation process, because like he explained, in Europe, they take a more preventative approach. So they'd rather do the regulation process and have that more strict up front, where you have lists of ingredients you can't use, and then it's on the companies to figure out, okay, well, what can I use? And then make that work and be able to sell their products. Versus in America, it's a free for all. And then it's the regulation process of getting something banned is the problem. It's it goes way too far. And then once it's caused all of these problems, then it's oh, well, now we need to jump through all these hurdles to regulate this so that people don't continue to get hurt, where it should be the other way around, right? If you're more strict up front and you're being more preventative, then the reactionary red tape doesn't need to even be there. But obviously, we know, we just talked about, like you said, with the kind of capitalist approach, they care more about the profits of these companies than protecting their people.
Well, yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying, but they go hand in hand in that you need to have a standard in place, first of all, which is a regulatory process, to have a proactive approach and get to a point of what the UK is doing.
Yeah.
Like you just said, you have to have a list of ingredients that cannot be used.
Yeah.
So that has to come through a regulatory process, which stops it being a free-for-all, right? And that's where you regulate the capitalist idea a little bit more. So I totally agree. That's what you're talking about. The proactive approach is really, really important. But beyond the regulatory process, it's being proactive is important because it saves everybody money. We're talking about money here. And if you healthcare expenditures are the highest expenditure that I think is a part of the US government. I'm not sure about that, because I would say military spending is probably really, really high as well. But it's definitely up there on the list in terms of, people get sick and then you got to take care of them. And obviously private healthcare and public healthcare is a huge conversation in the US, but you could start with just preventing people from being so sick. And that would be a huge, huge plus to people having to spend on their own health, long term, care, and then also, probably alongside of that, finding the right treatments, because we know that pharma is not taking advantage of people being sick from these things that are being used in the food. So there's a lot of, I think, knock-on effects is what we're talking about.
For sure. And I've seen a lot of stuff about Kellogg's recently. Like there's a lot of protests going on where people were protesting at their buildings. And I think that there's been a lot of pushback against Kellogg's more recently in response to some of their ingredients. So I'm not sure what ended up happening with that, but
yeah, I think
that's one of the companies he was talking about, like right at the end.
The video is a little bit older now, right? I think so. Things are transpiring, things are changing in the U.S. Hopefully for the better, and change has to start somewhere. Somebody's got to initiate the change, and then from there things will hopefully move in the right direction. So give us your thoughts down below. Let us know if you like this video. Let us know if there's anything else that you want us to check out. We are opening our catalog. I don't know why our fan just started spinning into oblivion. So if you see a whirlwind going on, or can hear a whirlwind going on, that's why. But we'd like to expand our content. So if you got UK suggestions, if you got food suggestions, if you got alternative content suggestions in general, let us know in the comment section down below. They got to do what else, Sam, before they go?
Make sure you hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, and then you need to have a great day.
That's right. We'll see you on our next one.
Thanks for watching.